Hello, everyone, and welcome to Random Encounter 235.5 or 235 and a half. Let's just make this 236. So you may have noticed this isn't our usual day for posting. Usually we post alternating Mondays with Rhythm Encounter, and you should be listening to Rhythm Encounter right now, right? Here's the thing. Rhythm Encounter is taking a week off, but this gave us a big opportunity because a potential Game of the Year contender, possibly a Game of the Decade contender based on a lot of the reviews, has dropped this week. So we get an opportunity to talk about it. We'll be back again with more random next week, and then Rhythm Encounter will be getting back on schedule after that. So if you listen to this podcast, you probably like RPGs and video games. And if you like RPGs and video games, you definitely know what we're going to be talking about today, and that is Elden Ring. This is apparently an incredible game, and we're going to be talking to someone who is making their very first appearance on the podcast, and they reviewed the game for the site, and I am super excited to talk to them. Bob Richardson. Hey, Bob.
Hey, how's it going?
It is going really, really well. It is going to be a busy month ahead. February and March have been crazy months for video games, and like the number of releases and big releases next month are crazy.
Yeah, I was in the middle of Dying Light 2, and then Elden Ring fell in my lap, and I was like, well, I think I'm prioritizing this, and I'm excited for Dying Light 2. I love the first Dying Light. Yep. But this, like last couple of years, the start of the year has just been phenomenal releases back to back.
Oh yeah, I know. And like coming up in the next month, we have Triangle Strategy, depending on where you're coming from, Stranger of Paradise, Final Fantasy Origin, Tiny Tina's Wonderland, like a ton of Weird West is coming out. A lot of stuff coming out in the next month. But I don't think a lot of people are going to be playing it because I think a lot of people are still going to be stuck deep into Elden Ring.
Yeah, and Elden Ring is one of those games where once it sinks its teeth in you, it's not letting go. It's kind of hard to step away from, honestly. It consumes all mind, soul, and body. And I couldn't be more enthralled about it.
Well, interesting you said soul, because for those who don't know, just a little bit of background, Elden Ring is from FromSoftware, and they have a very long history of making video games going all the way back to the 90s, but they're best known for their the Dark Souls trilogy. Now, this game, it launched an entirely new genre of tough-as-nails RPGs that required split-second timing and the learning of boss patterns, actually the learning of patterns of basically any enemy to progress. Like games include Demon Souls, Dark Souls 1, 2, 3, Bloodborne, Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice. And their latest title is, in fact, Elden Ring. And it's been people have been really looking forward to this the last few years since Sekiro was released. And it sounds like they really hit it out of the park. I mean, I know a lot of people don't put a lot of stock in numbers, but like it's currently holding a 97 on Metacritic, and that's nuts. That's completely crazy.
Well, I mean, it's for good reason. I mean, you got a seasoned team of veterans working on this. You've got a noteworthy director. You know, everyone knows Miyazaki. This team created a genre. They're the flag bearers, right? And many have tried to copy, and many have put their own spin on it, and they've done it capably. Like Neo, I love Neo 2 especially. But you know, no one does Souls games quite like the creators of Dark Souls FromSoftware.
But what is your background with Souls like, and specifically Dark Souls? Like, how would you define the genre?
I think action RPG is how I would define it. I think when Demon Souls first came out on the PS2, I think, or PS3, people were like, it's an obscenely hard game. People were just emphasizing how difficult it is. And I remember hearing about, I'm like, yeah, I don't like games that are hard for the sake of being hard. You know, we think of games like, Kaizo Mario games, or, I Want to Be the Guy, and they're just hard. The Souls games aren't just hard. And in some ways, I would say they're not even really that hard. And I've gotten, backlash for saying things like that from people before. It's like, these are really hard games where you think you're too good. I'm not saying I'm like an above average gamer or anything. What I'm saying is, the design of these games is so fantastic that you could find shortcuts and bonfires everywhere. And getting to a boss might be a 10-second sprint to the door. And the boss, you're going to maybe beat your head into it again and again, but eventually you're going to get it. And dying in itself is not a good metric for difficulty. I think it's more about the frustration. And I've never really felt frustrated playing Dark Souls games. There was this one boss, a major boss I was fighting, literally took me an hour and a half. I timed it. And I was not beat my head up against it. I was trying different things, but at no point in that hour and a half did I at all get frustrated. And I think that's the beauty of the Souls games is, someone says, oh, you spend an hour and a half boss, that's a hard game. Like by one metric, I would say yes, but it never felt difficult. I think when people say difficulty, they think frustration. And I didn't feel that way. Like you play a Mega Man game and you jump into the spikes, then, that's annoying. That's difficult because you got to like platform around all this stuff. Souls games, you might get killed, but you're getting back up on that horse. You're going. And, the Souls games are known for a few things. It's the challenge, of course, of the combat. There's also the level design and the sense of discovery. Like these are phenomenally designed games that kind of follow the same formula, but they also reinvent themselves in a few ways. Like everyone's aware of like the enemy hiding behind the wall. You open a door and then you get hit by a trap. Things like that. It's very Souls-like. But the intricacies of rooms, castles, hallways, and in Elden Ring's case, the entire world. That's really the hallmark of what makes FromSoftware games so excellent. It's not just the boss design. And in fact, I would say the bosses are less important than the level design itself. And when you're playing a Dark Souls game, like the 3 Dark Souls games are known for, you go from one place to another. And while they can be a little bit spacious, like you honor a force and there's some open-endedness there, for the most part, these games are pretty linear. You're going from point A to point B, and there's some forks in the road and a secret door you can open and maybe. But Elden Ring just reinvents the genre basically by introducing the open world mechanic, which you think of something like Witcher 3 with open world. And, there's so much you can do in that world. There's so much to see and it feels like a real world. Elden Ring's just like that, but to the nth degree because it's still a Souls game. So while you're running around a field, while you're looking for a cave or you're trying to find out how to get into that shattered castle wall, you're still discovering things and encountering enemies and having to do this cutthroat combat that you could die in any fight if you just get swarmed by a bunch of weak enemies, or you turn a corner and there's an elite enemy there. So it still feels like Dark Souls, just blown out of the water though, just like gigantic on a magnified scale. And that's, I think, why people are going to love Elden Ring. I was talking to someone who was playing it recently. They just picked it up and they just played it. And they literally said, I don't know if I can ever go back to Dark Souls, which is a thing to say because Dark Souls games are still considered to be some of the best games in the action RPG genre. So the fact that Elden Ring is like, I can't ever go back is saying something.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me the way that people are saying that this has redefined the open world in a way that hasn't really happened since like Breath of the Wild back in 2017. What really gets me is how it sounds like the game merges traditional Dark Souls dungeons and styles of locations with the open world, and specifically how that changes the way that you can handle boss battles or even just battles against difficult enemies.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Because I commented on my review, sometimes if you are up against a boss that is required for you to beat in order for you to progress, there's only so much you can do to get stronger. Like you might use a different item, coat your weapon in like lightning paper or whatever. You can do a bunch of different things to fight that boss. But if you want to like get stronger, you're gonna have to grind up against skeletons or fight a big baddie that you figured out the pattern on and just get souls and then level up. There's not a whole lot. Like there are some branching paths, but it's pretty restricted. In Elden Ring, there have been a couple times I fought a boss. I'm like, whoa, I am not ready for this guy. I'm going to go east instead of west. And then I'm going to spend the next 5 hours just messing around over there. And I'll come back to this guy later. And that strategy has worked with me. And I'm over 45 hours into the game. It's worked for me the entire time. If you just fight an enemy or a boss that's too hard, just don't go there. Literally go in any of the other 12 places you could go.
Yeah, you can go in any direction. You're going to find stuff to do.
Exactly. Or go to old places. There's old places where you're like, that catacombs, I'm not ready for that yet. And you'll forget about it. And you can put markers on the map, of course. But like old or new, there's always something to do in this game.
Which is pretty crazy when you think about just how much stuff there is in this game. From what I've heard, it's exactly that. Every single time you go over a hill, you're seeing things and you're like, what's that over there? Oh, let's go over there. Like that's what the open world mechanics, I guess, should be.
Yep. Yeah, so there were a few cases in the Dark Souls series where people have these memorable experiences, like the first time you see Anne Orlando. It's like, whoa, what is that? And like you're gonna go to that castle and it's very exciting. And Anne Orlando's a thing. All Souls fans know that. So what you just said is exactly right in Elden Ring as well, because you'll run over a hill and then you get to the top of it and you see ruins, or you see a tower, or you'll see, a swamp, or this literally this rock creature with a building on top of it walking around. You're like, what is even happening right now? And that's the cool thing about it. It's like you're having these Anne Orlando moments constantly where you just see something in the distance, and it's such brilliant design because it makes you salivate. You're like, I want to go there. But that's like one direction. You got 360. You can turn all the way around and you're going to see stuff all around you. And this is one direction. And you're spoiled for choice. And it's a beautiful thing.
Well, what's fascinating to me is that in the review, you specifically say that you are not a giant fan of the open world up until this point. You just don't like open world games. What didn't you like about open world games, and what's different about this open world that makes you connect to it in a way that the other ones just bounced off you?
Yeah, so, at risk of upsetting some people, I'll take Skyrim.
Oh, it's okay. I talk about Chrono Cross and Saga all the time on here. I haven't upset anyone yet. At least that I care about.
yeah. So Skyrim has no personality. That world, in some ways it looks very beautiful. Like there's some people who play this game and post screenshots and everything. Yes, it is a beautiful world in all respects, but it's all pomp and there's no substance. You run across a dragon, you shoot the dragon with some arrows, you spam your fire spell or whatever. There's not a lot to the game. There's no teeth. There's no tension. And while you're running around an open field, there's not a lot going on. Like you're in an open field, that's kind of cool, but wouldn't it be cool if there were some threatening enemies or if there was some unique architecture? The thing that blows my mind about Elden Ring, and Witcher 3 did a lot of this as well, is every square foot of this world feels like it was designed independently. There's no like, we're just going to put a generic open field in this area. We're going to copy and paste it and put it over there. We're going to copy and paste it and put it over here. Nothing feels copied and pasted except for the catacombs. The catacombs are a unique sort of dungeon you run into every now and again. Those feel very routine. Maybe that's on purpose. I'm not entirely sure. But as for like the actual open world itself, every cliff, every hill, every rock, every tree, every piece of tall grass, it feels unique. I've never run into a place and be like, I feel like I've been here before. There's landmarks everywhere. And that breathes personality. That makes it feel real. Because it's not just like a video game. Like, of course it is a video game, but it doesn't feel that way. And that's what's most important. I think that's what a lot of game developers try to achieve with their games. Like they want to take people to a new place. You want to transpose them into a world that is not their own so that they can escape or enjoy themselves or become immersed in an experience or to take in a story. And Elden Ring's doing that. And other open world games, they really got to step up their game because the bar is being pushed. And the one time I've said the bar is being pushed before was with Disco Elysium. That was specifically because of story development in that game. But in Elden Ring, as far as like game design, level design, world building is concerned, everyone in this industry really has to work hard if they're going to try to even touch what FromSoftware did here.
I mean, that's really nice to hear because, I mean, for decades and decades in the video game industry, the open world was the dream. That was what everyone was reaching for. And you saw glimpses of that with Skyrim, for example, or like the Capital Wasteland in Fallout 3, or Hyrule in Breath of the Wild, or Los Santos in GTA 5, I would argue, is one of the most immersive open worlds that had existed up to that point.
Yep.
But you're right. Open world, like a lot of the developers just put an open world into their games because it's an expected gameplay element, and that almost defeats the purpose. So the fact that Elden Ring is not just upping their game, but is like redefining what the open world can do is really a nice thing to hear, because it might mean that other developers realize, oh, we can't be lazy anymore. We can't copy and paste the hill. We have to design a world, and if we can't design the world to that level, maybe we should make the world a little bit smaller. and make a more focused gameplay experience instead.
Yeah, I agree with that completely. I hope that's how they would be approaching it.
There's a
Because some
possibility we're giving game developers too much credit here.
well, no, I think that's what people want to do. But when you're a studio like From Software, you have the talent, you have the experience, you have the resources to do something like this. So it's hard for everyone to meet this standard if they don't have the team or the financial resources, the reputation. From Software can take their time making things because everyone expects it to be fantastic. It's the same thing with Rockstar games. Like everyone expects Rockstar to have this certain standard. The next GTA game is going to be phenomenal because everyone just expects it to be. We trust that it will be. From Software's next Souls game, people they're going to be like, please take my money. You want to charge me $70, $80, whatever the new going rate is for a AAA game, I will pay it because I know I'm going to get a high quality game here. It's going to be worth my time and worth my money. But the other thing I want to say is, there's a risk here that From Software took with Elden Ring. I touched on it a bit in my review. I think it really needs to be emphasized, though. They could have made Dark Souls 4. They could have done the same thing they've done before, and they would have made money, and it would have been easy, and I think fans would have loved it. But they took a chance here by creating a giant open world game. They basically meshed genres. They took the Souls genre, they took open world, and they put them together. Like, let's see if we can make our strong level design team make an entire world. And they did it. They killed it. And I think it's important for publishers, and I think it's important for developers to realize the importance of taking risks. If you have faith in your vision, if you have faith in your team, you have a strong roadmap, you've planned it out, you understand the structure and the amount of money you could pay your team for a certain amount of time, you could trust that taking a chance might actually earn you a whole lot of credibility and give you the opportunity to give players a trust in you maybe they didn't have before. Because From Software can rest on their laurels and just keep making Souls games, or they can push the industry forward. And I think gamers are going to love From Software for this specific.
There's a certain kind of magic that happens when the creator of a genre actually continues to push that genre forward instead of letting other people pick up the torch and go with it. I mean, if you look at like what Apple did with the iPod and going into the iPhone and like that's the same kind of thing where they didn't just do the same thing over and over again years ago. They created new things and pushed it forward. That's different nowadays. But the fact that From Software is doing that with this game, it's very heartening. And it's been fascinating to me to look at this game and the reception this game has received versus the reception that, say, Cyberpunk 2077 has received. And I'm not talking about like the bugs or the PlayStation 4 release or anything like that. I feel like CD Projekt Red had very similar levels of credibility and excitement and hype and everything going into Cyberpunk 2077. And when not only did they not meet that hype, they undershot it by a considerable margin. It did massive amounts of damage to their overall brand and to gamers' love of their games. Whereas it sounds like From Software, because they delivered everything that they promised, it's going over the moon. Like the love for this developer is just incredible right now.
Yeah, I would even argue they didn't just deliver on their promise. They went beyond expectation, which the expectations were already really high. I think a lot of people were worried and shy because Cyberpunk was kind of a fiasco when it came out. And people were worried, there's giant promises here. What if they can't meet the expectation? What if it's a buggy mess? And that's not what happened here. They delivered and they went above expectations. People were probably thinking too small. I don't think people realized what they were getting. And I think that's part of the reason why the reception has been so fantastic. It's like, this is more than I was expecting. You guys, you blew me away here. And, I think, especially in this day and age, people aren't surprised too often. Sometimes when things are done differently, they're only done differently by a little bit, but this is vastly different and it worked. And again, it goes back to that risk taking. They didn't really have a previous formula to fall back on. Yeah, it's kind of Soulsy in the combat and all that. But the fact that it's not just wide open fields that you just run through for 10 20 minutes before you find something interesting is a big deal.
Yeah, I remember I think it was on IGN, they were talking to one of the developers, it might have been about it, and they were like, the game shouldn't take too long to beat. It's probably not going to take as much time as you think. I don't think there's as much to do. It's almost like they were lowering expectations a little bit going into it, and they did not need to.
I think part of the appeal there, though, is you got people are getting older, and people with less time on their hands, people are having kids and stuff, and they're like, I can't afford to put 100 hours into a game anymore. So, it's almost like marketing in that way. It's like, it's only 30 hours. Don't worry. The fact of the matter is, this is not a 30-hour game.
Yeah.
There's like, it might be 30 hours if you know exactly what you're doing and you're really good at the game and you know how to min-max everything. But even setting that aside, that's if you ignore everything this game has to offer. Part of the charm of this game is you could do anything and you could do everything and you could do a little bit of everything. You don't have to like comb every square foot of this map. But if you're literally just going from point A to point B to try and beat the game, you're missing the point.
Yeah. This is, that's what a Souls game traditionally was, as you said, very linear, whereas this is something new. Whereas this is something very new. I wanted to ask you about, I've never read his books, but famously George R.R. Martin of the A Song of Ice and Fire series, more popularly known as Game of Thrones, supposedly wrote all of the lore for this world. And you say that you're not detecting his finger, any of like his touch on it. Like this game is pure Miyazaki. Like it's the director of this game. It's his fingerprints all over this. So maybe, what do you think? It would be an interpretation of what Martin wrote, or?
Yeah, it's hard for any of us to say. I think, we would have to hear it from them directly. Stylistically, it feels like Miyazaki's work. It might be that George R. R. Martin created the lore and created the backstory and the ethos behind what's going on here. Whereas, the dialogue of the characters, if you've spoken to an NPC in a Souls game, you've spoken to every single character in this game. It's delivered very similarly. The voice acting is very similar. Everyone's got a little bit of madness in them. Everyone's a little bit depressed. It just feels very Soulsy. As for the larger plot, the Souls games have been clear as mud. Unless you go to a wiki or you really put a lot of time reading every item description and try and understand what exactly is going on, where you're trying to ignite the first flame and what does that even really mean precisely. It's very loosely touched upon throughout the entire game. And I think that's on purpose, and it's a good thing. But here, it feels like Miyazaki's work. I trust that George R. R. Martin worked on it. I'm not denying that he did. It doesn't feel like something he did.
Okay, that makes complete sense to me. It seems like maybe it's an interpretation of what he delivered, which would be, obviously they have some experience with delivering this kind of world. In terms of the storytelling of this game, would you say, again, I haven't played it, so I can't tell you, but is it environmental storytelling in terms of getting the story? Do you really have to just pay attention to what's going on around you in order to get what is going on around you, I guess?
For me, this is not the kind of storytelling I personally like. I'm definitely more of a, give me a plot, give me a rising progression until we hit the climax and then hit the resolution. And I want to be dialogue driven. I want more showing, less telling, to the moon, your typical JRPG, the things that hit the feels. I really like Divinity and Pillars of Eternity. I like these stories where you can really sink your teeth in the world and understand the gods and stuff. And it's all very clear. There's very little interpretation. But the Souls games are cool because nothing's clear and you kind of fill in the gaps yourself. It demands more of the players. In a sense, the story is just as difficult as the gameplay because you can't fully understand what's going on unless you play it and replay it and maybe talk to other people who really know what's going on. If you look at the environment, you get a sense something terrible has happened here and you can feel it and it looks terrible. There's vines growing on old castle walls that are hacked away in a diagonal slant. You've got, these gilded rooms in these foreboding castles where maybe there was a ruler here or a king who was very unjust. And these are assumptions you're making just by observing it. The way a historian might look at some pottery or might look at a painting and try to infer things about the way civilization lived 1,000 or so years ago. That's the storytelling. There's dialogue. That's the most you're going to get in terms of directly what's going on. You're going to see some old character who's got some backstory, who's lived 1,000 years, and they're going to tell you exactly what's going on. Here's why the Elden Ring is important. Here's why the Erd Tree is important. And even then, even when they talk about it, you're not entirely sure what's going on. There's a lot of references to names, and you're like, I don't even know who that is. And then there's names to this cataclysmic event. You're like, I don't really know what that is. And all the while, you spend most of your time just like killing things and trying to not die and try to level up and find goodies and stuff. It is definitely a series that is more driven by its gameplay and discovery rather than the storytelling.
It's fascinating to me how it seems that for many Souls games, and certainly for this one, there is a real juxtaposition between the world, which seems to be depressing and hopeless, and the level of joy that the player gets in playing and defeating these enemies and exploring. And that juxtaposition is very interesting to me. It's probably an extraordinarily hard balancing act to pull off, and it seems like they just keep doing it.
Well, I think there's a few things going on there. I think the first important thing to remember is it feels like an authentic world, and I don't care if it's depressing or if it's happy or somewhere in between. If it feels like a real place, people are going to be drawn to it, because that's, for a lot of people, that's why we play video games. Like we want to experience these places we couldn't experience in the real world.
Yeah, again, that was the draw of the open world for decades. It was the open world's necessary to make people believe that they are in these places.
Yeah, the same reason people watch a movie or read a book. It's like, you want to get lost in a world, take me to a different place. And when I'm playing this game, I feel like I'm in a different place. And whether it's depressing or not, it feels cool. And as depressing as it is, no one really does depressing quite like or as well as FromSoftware. So in that way, it's also a very authentic experience, because it's like, I'm not really getting this anywhere else. Like, sad things happen in every good story. There's always conflict, but the gloom and the just layer of blah this entire game exudes is phenomenal, and no one does it like them.
Well, the line that really exemplified your review for me was, I believe the illusion.
Yeah, because we all know it's an illusion. We all know it's a game, but like, can you trick me? Can I be playing this game for an hour, totally unaware of what's going on around me, and then not realize time has passed? And that's flow. That's what psychologists call flow. And that's what people want, because that shows that you're immersed. That shows that you're having a good time.
Well, outside of the gameplay, I'm curious about you talk a lot about the music and sound design in the game, and how it, I guess, it would deepen the reality of the world that you're surrounded and the immersion that you're feeling. What is it like? Like, you mentioned that the voice acting isn't nothing to, I guess, write home about in a very specific way. Like, the voice acting does the job that it's supposed to do, but it sounds like the music does more than that.
Well, the voice acting is excellent. It just meets the standard of a Souls game. Like, I kind of brushed away, because I'm speaking to Souls fans when I write things like that, because I'm like, what the voice acting is. Like, if you're hearing, the people in Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3 talk, you're hearing the people in this game talk.
Okay, it's hitting a very specific tone then.
Yes, but all the lines are well delivered.
Okay.
And, it accentuates the experience. As for the music, the music's always been good in, Dark Souls and things like that. And for me, the music in games like this kind of falls in the background. I kind of forget it's there. But part of that's a good thing, because you want it to just seamlessly bleed into the experience. Like, if you're creating a complex recipe of flavors, you don't want people to necessarily taste every single thing you're putting in there. You want it to be one exact flavor. And I'd say that's what the music accomplishes here. I have taken some time to stop and listen. And this game is all about the deep, low strings. It's a lot of like cellos and basses and violins that are just like very low in tone and long, and it's gloomy, and that just makes everything else pop. It makes everything else a little more colorful. Even though the world itself is not colorful, it livens it up. It makes it more of what it should be.
Yeah, which is what music should be in a video game, or in any real piece of media.
Yep.
It's fascinating to me the way, like, I've been looking at screenshots and looking at footage of this game. Another thing that the Souls-likes excel in is absolutely stunning depictions of just horribleness and ugliness, and, like you say, grays, browns, washed out greens, and yet the vistas that you see are still absolutely stunning.
Yep. So I mean, we can get into some really deep themes here if we wanted to, but I think part of that is like life goes on. And I think part of
Mm.
that's also what's going on with the Dark Souls series. Like, yeah, things are terrible. There's undead everywhere, but still the sun rises, and still, you got this tree, the big tree, the glowing tree is like, oh, it's majestic, it's beautiful. So, civilizations come and gone, rulers come and go, people suffer, and there's war and stuff, but there will always be another tomorrow. And I don't know if that's the message they're trying to deliver, but there's beauty in everything. And I think destruction is another form of creation. It's kind of a trite thing to say. I know it's cliche, but I think you can appreciate something. You can appreciate a ruin. Like, I think if I saw a ruin in person, like an old castle, I think I would love it just as much as if the castle were completely well built and still standing and touched up over time.
It's the history and the story of the place. Even if you don't know what that story is, you can sense it.
Yeah. This was a thing at one time. You could almost fill in the gaps to see, like, that wall used to be there, and the people used to live here and have lives, and they used to be love and hate and have children, and now it's gone, and that's okay. People move on.
Well, I really wanted to thank you for coming on today and making the time to pop on, because this game it's massive, it's huge, and people are talking about it in a way that people haven't really talked about games for a while. Like, there was a big conversation, there was conversations going on about Horizon Forbidden West, and I mean, I just finished Horizon Zero Dawn and I adored it, and I can't wait to play Horizon Forbidden West, but this seems to transcend the usual conversations about video games in a way that I've not seen for a long, long time. And that is something that's really exciting, because it might be a sign of things that could come in the future from other developers who are inspired by this game.
It's an important game. I mean, aside from it being a fun experience, like, you're going to play it, you're going to put in 60 or 100 or however many hours you want to put in, and it's fun, and then you're going to move on and do something. But what's left behind is exactly what you said. It's an inspiration, and it's important to the health of the industry, which makes it important to us as consumers. And I think, looking at sales, the game's got 55,000 reviews on Steam, and it's mixed because of all the technical issues that sometimes comes with PC games. Love it or hate it, this is an important game. Yep. Because it's pushing the genre forward, it's pushing the industry forward, and it's letting, again, people know, take risks, do things differently, and you too will have a footnote in the history of this wonderful industry that we all enjoy.
Well, thank you very much for joining me on this very small piece of the history of a industry we all enjoy. And this was your first episode, and I'm really glad that you were here to talk about this specific game. That's pretty awesome.
And it's an honor and a privilege. Thank you for asking me.
Oh, it was. Look, when we talked about this game coming up, and you said, I'm really excited for Elden Ring in the upcoming year. We talked in January, and I was like, I wanted to hear your thoughts about this game, and I'm really, really happy that you reviewed this, because it's I think it's an exceptional review, and the link will be in the description for anyone who is looking for it. No discussion question today, because we're just, again, real short episode, just talking about Elden Ring, nice and focused. But if you enjoyed this episode, we have lots of other episodes of Random Encounter, including one that we had last week, and one that will be next week. And next week's episode is going to be focused on the Final Fantasy 4, 5, and 6, so the later pixel remasters. 6 just got released, and there are some interesting things going on in that game, especially when it comes to the opera. And I am super excited to talk to our reviewers about that next week. But this is not the only podcast we have. We also have a Retro Encounter with Mike Solosi. We just did a 2-parter on Knights of the Old Republic, Star Wars, and those were a blast, because that's an amazing game. And the next episode that's coming up, it's going to be a episode focused on properties that would make a really, really great RPG adaptation. So that's going to be a fun conversation. We have Rhythm Encounter, which you'd be listening to right now, but you're not. You're listening to me. So in 2 weeks, we're going to be picking that back up again. If you'd like to get in contact with us here at Random, you can fire me off a message at podcast@rpgfan.com. I would love to hear from you if you have any comments about episodes or discussion questions. If you have any idea for discussion questions, we love putting those on the air. Just fire off a message. If you have something for me specifically about any reviews or ideas, you can fire me off a message at jlogan@rpgfan.com, or you can find me on Twitter at Jono_Logan. Now, I'm not the only one who has an internet presence here. Bob, where can we find you online?
So the best way to get in touch with me would probably be the RPG Fan email, bob@rpgfan.com. Always happy to hear from readers. I get emails, every now and again. Whether you disagree, agree, you want to tell me how wrong I am and how I don't understand this or that, the other, or anything. I don't care. It's always a joy to hear from readers. So if you want to have a conversation or anything, that's probably the best way to reach out to me. And I hope you're enjoying Elden Ring.
I think that a lot of people are. I think this game is going to probably do fairly well. Anyway, if you enjoyed this podcast, please share it with your friends. You can help us get the word out there. You can rate us on iTunes or your podcast player of choice. Bob, again, thank you so much for joining me today. I really, really appreciate it. I had a great time talking to you about this game.
Yeah, I as well. Thank you for having me.
Okay, and to all of you out there, whatever you're playing, have fun.